I'm Dave Breakenridge, and this is Under the Dome. It's been an eventful start to Danielle Smith's tenure as Alberta Premier, between walking back comments related to discrimination against the unvaccinated and the war in Ukraine, to preparing for her party's AGM and announcing her first cabinet. We'll get into that and more on today's Under the Dome. My guest today, Calgary Sun columnist Rick Bell, Edmonton Journal political reporter Lisa Johnson. Thanks very much for joining me. There's a lot to talk about involving new Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. We will jump into it right away here. Lisa, it has been a fairly eventful, I guess for lack of a better word, first week and change for the new Premier. She was sworn in just after the Thanksgiving holiday and kind of all instantly stepped in controversy. This is a politician who's known for past controversies. I'm just wondering if you can walk us through the first week or so of Danielle Smith's term as Premier.
Yeah, Dave, there certainly has been a lot of controversy. There's been some clarifications. There's been at least one full-throated apology from the new Premier. But I want to go back to her victory speech back in Calgary when she won the leadership on October 6th. This was 2 weeks ago now.
Now, friends, in the months ahead, we must recognize that there are those in Ottawa and the establishment, even some in Alberta, that don't want to see our party be unified. They don't want us to succeed. And sadly, these folks will do and say almost anything to keep us from succeeding. They will dredge up old statements and mistakes from the past. They will use cancel culture and fear-mongering in an attempt to scare and dissuade Albertans from supporting our MLAs and me.
That to me just seemed like an interesting foreshadowing of some of the stuff that became the main topics of discussion in Alberta politics since she's taken office. In the first week of her being sworn in, she, announced that she was running in a by-election in Brooks Medicine Hat, which wasn't uncontroversial on its own. A lot of people said that she should be calling a by-election in Calgary Elbow, which has been vacant since Doug Schweitzer left that seat this summer. So her choice of where to run in a by-election was somewhat controversial. It was definitely criticized by some. And then she did a full press conference on the Monday morning after being sworn in that in a lot of ways, carried on a lot of the promises that she's made throughout the leadership campaign. But she also made like a couple of statements that ended up getting her in hot water. I mean, obviously her Sovereignty Act, which she's been pitching as a way for Alberta to refuse to enforce federal laws it doesn't like. She was pressed on that during the news conference, and she clarified that, ultimately the Supreme Court of Canada has the final say on these issues, which is a bit of a departure from how she's presented the Alberta Sovereignty Act in the past. And she also called unvaccinated people the most discriminated against group that she's seen in her lifetime. And of course, later on, she had to clarify that she didn't intend to trivialize the discrimination faced by minority communities or persecuted groups around the world. She didn't exactly apologize and take it back, though. So that was coming right out of the gate. And that's not to mention the fact that she said she will replace Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Hinshaw, and recruit an entirely new team of advisors in public health for her to get advice from. So that's just some of the things that happened in the first week.
Yeah, and Rick, what do you make of that? This idea that in her speech, as Lisa said, when she won the leadership, she's talking about people who were trying to divide the party and using cancel culture and all of that. And then she kind of just walks into these controversies around comments that I don't think anyone necessarily wants to cancel the Premier. She is the Premier. Some people, I imagine, want to vote her out come springtime, but she instantly hit with these controversies where you have her having to walk back comments because they're very the notion that the unvaccinated are the most discriminated against in her lifetime is just kind of beyond the pale, right? What do you make of this politician who admittedly self-admittedly has no quote unquote crazy radar. At least that's what her staff tell her. And has a knack of kind of fomenting this kind of controversy.
Well, I guess the way I look at it is that the community that faced the most restrictions on their freedoms in the last year were those who made a choice not to be vaccinated. I don't think I've ever experienced a situation in my lifetime where a person was fired from their job, or not allowed to watch their kids play hockey, or not allowed to go visit a loved one in long-term care or hospital, or not allowed to go get on a plane to either go across the country to see family or even travel across the border. So they have been the most discriminated against group that I've ever witnessed in my lifetime. That's a pretty extreme level of discrimination that we have seen. I don't take away any of the discrimination that I've seen in those other groups that you mentioned, but this has been an extraordinary time in the last year in particular. And I want people to know that I find that unacceptable, that we are not going to create a segregated society on the basis of a medical choice.
Well, the controversy is justified. She has to decide now, like as in now, right now, whether the UCP actually wants to win the next election, or whether we have a very entertaining 7-month circus prior to the NDP becoming the government again. I mean, I am, my favorite word, gobsmacked by the fact that she has not really shown an electable Danielle Smith to us yet. Now, I realize she hasn't had her party convention. I realize she hasn't picked her cabinet. I realize she hasn't got a seat in the legislature yet. All of that. But at the moment, I don't see any evidence that she actually wants to win the election. She is not going to win the election by saying a statement which she believes, which is the unvaccinated are the most discriminated against in her lifetime. She believes that. That's why she didn't apologize, because she believes it. I honestly believe she probably has a view on Ukraine that is different than the majority of Canadians. She did have to apologize for that, but I still think she probably holds a view that says that NATO and Ukraine are at least in part to blame for what's happening. I think she probably still believes that because her followers believe it. They email me and tell me that they believe it. They tell me, Danielle Smith, hang in there. Don't let the woke left crazy lame-brained dupes of George Soros in the media get after you. Don't cave. So that's happening. So as long as she wants to stay the candidate for the people who voted her in, then we're going to have a problem. She's going to have a problem. And it's going to be this sort of chaotic stuff. She has to make a decision. Does she say, yes, I got elected. Yes, I'm going to do a few things for you. I'm going to do a watered-down Sovereignty Act. I'm going to protect the unvaccinated in human rights law. And I'm going to get rid of the AHS board. Are you happy now? So I'm going to take after Trudeau, and I'm going to punish AHS for being nasty during COVID. But I also have to move on now and actually win the election. Instead, what she told me was her strategy is keep the rural folks happy. 39 seats. I only need 44. I just need 5 more in Calgary or Edmonton. So she is really fixated on, at the moment, unless she changes in the next couple of days, on keeping her core supporters happy and keeping rural Alberta happy. She's not interested in keeping me happy or you happy or Lisa happy. That's her goal. But I mean, I really believe that that's what she has to figure out. Because if she doesn't figure it out, she'll be on the sidelines a few months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned these comments about Ukraine, and Lisa, kudos to blogger, freelance writer Justin Ling for taking the time to go through her social media page on locals.com. And I remember when she left her radio show and she said, look, I I can't be as freewheeling as I want to be on corporate radio. I've got to step away. There's the Twitter mob. There's all of that. So I'm going to leave and I'm going to join up with this online platform called locals.com. I think many would see it as kind of this far right or right-leaning free speech absolutist platform. And so Justin Ling goes through these posts and sees all sorts of comments that I think a lot of people got worked up about, but it was the Ukraine piece in particular that really got her in hot water. Lisa, what happened with those comments, and how did Smith respond, and why do you suppose it took her several days before she issued an apology? She went from downplaying it to saying, unequivocally, "I'm sorry, I said this."
Yeah, David. It first. So Justin's reporting last week kind of bubbled up at the end of the week, and then over the weekend, we started sifting through it. My colleagues were looking at these posts, and of course, her comments on Ukraine took a lot of heat, and pretty quickly, the NDP was calling for Danielle Smith to apologize and specifically to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But for a few days, Danielle Smith dug in her heels. Kind of going back to what Rick is saying, it certainly makes you wonder if she still believes this stuff. So she issued a statement on Tuesday, full-throatedly condemning the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but she didn't get into the specifics of how her views have changed, what views she still stands by, what ideas she promoted in the past she might still believe, or what she doesn't believe. So there's still quite a few questions about that. And like you say, Dave, she's no stranger to saying controversial things. Obviously, like during COVID, she was spreading misinformation about ivermectin as a treatment for COVID. And during the leadership race, she said that up until stage 4, cancer patients are responsible for preventing the disease. So it's not a new trend, but it's certainly raising new questions, I guess, about her judgment now that she's in the Premier's office.
Yeah, now, Rick, from your perspective, like the NDP had spent, I think, the last year really kind of just doing the outrage of the day, and some of it kind of got tired, and some of it, you had okay, you're looking for a controversy every day. Does Danielle Smith give them a gift that allows them to really kind of hone in on presenting her as not a great premier and look at what the things she's saying, and she won't apologize for, the vaccination comments or the Ukraine comments? Does that help them in places like Calgary, where they need to win seats to potentially unseat the UCP?
Well, it's a gift in the sense of Danielle Smith is conforming to and validating the stereotype that her opponents have had of her, which is that she's, somewhat unhinged and has some strange views. I had breakfast with Rachel Notley a few days ago in Calgary. I have never seen her so relaxed, so happy, so energized, so invigorated. I wonder why. And that was before the Ukraine, the latest chapter in this three-ring circus. Of course it's going to help them. They could just watch this and see what happens. Again, there's got to be, I look at that and they say, well, she was a radio host. Well, there's lots of radio hosts. I've written thousands upon thousands of columns. I've never gone to any of these blogs she's talking about that she's going to. I'm not linking to any of this. And I've said lots of controversial things. But, it goes to judgment, and it goes to her having to explain maybe not every intricacy of every post, but why exactly, except by saying, I'm a libertarian, I have to look at everything, as to why she is so attracted to that particular, set of sources of source material. But again, I think the UCP, if you're just a UCP voter, if you're just a person that doesn't want the NDP to get in, you'd better start worrying. You better start worrying because there is a fight going on right now. There's going to be a fight within the party. There's going to be a fight in the general public. And I'm going to tell you right here, there will be a fight among her staffers as to whether she should shift gears now or not. And that is going to be a big question. There are very serious people in the UCP who have very serious concerns about where this is going in the very early days. But she is getting also a lot of perks, a lot of props from the group that elected her. I just assumed that she would do what I said, which is, I'm giving you these three things and then we move on.
Mm-hmm.
What's so hard about that? I don't get what's so hard about that. And as far as the apology, why did it take so long? Well, because in caucus at the retreat, there were people who were bringing up the fact that she had to act on this. I'm sure that's what happened. That's why when did the apology come out? Was it like 5:30 or something?
Yeah. Yeah,
it was like, take out the trash time. It was, why did it take so long and why was it so late in the day? Because I'm sure this was a subject of discussion among UCP MLAs, UCP staff. They wanted something done. So she said, yeah, this is ill-informed and I have a different view now and blah, blah, blah. But there's going to be more of this. She has to address the issue generally. And then she actually has to start governing on issues that matter to Albertans, not just matter to a small segment of Albertans, but to Albertans as a whole. So you're talking about Calgary. What are people concerned about in Calgary? The economy, the cost of living. She always talks about Pierre Poilievre. Oh, she's a big pal of Pierre Poilievre. Pierre Poilievre, yes, he's talked about the Freedom Convoy, but he spent most of his time getting those big crowds talking about what? The economy, the cost of living, inflation. What's her plans to deal with it? What's her plans to deal with affordability? The NDP have some ideas. Fine, they're not in government. What are her ideas? I don't know. I'm going to be very blunt here. I'm never blunt, but I'm going to do it once. I don't care what she thinks about Ukraine. I don't care what she thinks about COVID therapies. I don't care what she thinks about cancer treatment. I don't care what she thinks about 9/11 or any of this stuff. She is the Premier of Alberta. There are pressing issues. Deal with them. Period. Like, I'm just so frustrated that just get on with governing. Roll out some stuff. Explain what you're doing. Explain why you're doing it and move on. We're not on a crusade to remake Alberta. We're not on a crusade to deal with every global issue you've ever heard of and more. And the last thing I'd like to say on Danielle is, if people are yelling and screaming at you when you're a politician, that's par for the course. That's what politics is about. It's a blood sport. But when you become a punchline, when you become a character in editorial cartoons across the country, as she has become, that's when you begin to worry. When people are going, Danielle Smith, I mean, come on. Danielle Smith is your premier? Come on. How's that possible? That's when things get really bad. And she's on the edge of that. And that's why at the convention, she better come up with the speech of all ages.
So, yeah, to wrap up on that, Lisa, we talk about kind of getting on with it. This is, we've had the swearing in and a couple controversies, but this is the opportunity for her to get on with it. On Friday, she's set to announce a cabinet, and then there's the convention this weekend. What do we expect from her this weekend, and what are kind of the next steps for her as, we have a by-election and we get into the legislative session?
Yeah, well, she certainly needs to present a serious focus, I think, at the AGM this weekend. it's also going to be a litmus test in a lot of ways to figure, like, in terms of some of the policy proposals that are being brought forward, is this firmly Danielle Smith's party? Are the people from Take Back Alberta who are really eager to make their mark on the party, are they going to make their mark this weekend in terms of stacking the executive of the board, in terms of what policy proposals get approved? But Danielle certainly has to put forward a very serious, premierial face, I think, when she takes the mic on Saturday and addresses the members of a party.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we'll leave it there for now. Rick Bell, Lisa Johnson, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dave.
That's it for another episode. Don't forget you can find all past episodes at edmontonjournal.com/underthedome, or you can hit that subscribe button on YouTube. I'm Dave Breakenridge. We'll see you next time.